Sziasztok mindenkinek! Hello everyone, my name is Christine, and I am the host here at the Hungarian Heritage Podcast, the show where we connect your modern life to your Hungarian heritage. We will build bridges between Hungarians who live in Hungary to those with Hungarian heritage who live in all other parts of the world. Not to mention the bridges that we will build between the generations. This podcast is a place where everyone is welcome, where you don't even need to be Hungarian or speak Hungarian to join in on the fun. We will talk about all the things that we love about Hungary, the Hungarian people, and the Hungarian culture, as well as the cool things Hungarian people are doing around the world. We will discover new things, review things you may already know, and we will have a lot of fun along the way. So, if you're looking to make that first connection to your Hungarian heritage, or you're looking to dig a little deeper, then you're in the right place. Join me as we grow this community and continue to connect the circles of Hungarians around us. On this episode of the Hungarian Heritage Podcast, I will be speaking with fellow podcaster Sylvia Pop, and she is the creator and teacher of Hungarian with Sziszi, a Hungarian learning podcast. But that's not all. She also has a membership program with 3 options to choose from to help teach you Hungarian in a natural speaking and original way. Of course, we will first discuss Sziszi's Hungarian heritage, and then we'll move on to her language studies, her journey to the US, and all of the personal experiences that led her to create her unique and original way of teaching Hungarian. Make sure to listen until the end so you can find out how you can level up your Hungarian language learning experience. Please join me in welcoming Sylvia Pop to the podcast today. She is the creator behind the Hungarian language learning podcast, Hungarian with Sziszi. Thank you for being here today, Sziszi.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm really excited to talk all about your Hungarian learning podcast, but it's become a tradition that we talk a little bit about Hungarian heritage first. So let's start with your Hungarian heritage. You live in the US now, but tell us a little bit about what it was like for you growing up in Hungary. How long did you live in Hungary? What was your life like as a kid? Did you do like typical Hungarian things? Give us a little bit of an idea about that.
Yeah, so I'm 100% Hungarian.
Mm-hmm.
I was born and raised in Budapest. I lived there my whole life. I moved here 2 years ago, so it's not too much in the US yet. But I always lived in Budapest. And as for the heritage part, well, I was thinking, and I remember that we had folk dance classes in school, but it's not something I chose to do. So I don't think that counts. It was we just had to that time. But I was a scout for a Girl Scout. Well, in Hungarian, it's just scout,
right?
And for 15 years, I think. I'm still a scout, but I'm not an active member anymore. But once you're a scout forever. And in that scout, how do you call it? A scout team or a scout group?
I guess like a group. I don't know, like a scout. I'm not sure. They call it different things in the US. Like, I don't even know, like, because they have Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts.
Yeah.
But in Hungary or Hungarian, even Hungarian groups in the United States, it's just all boys and girls together, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I guess a group. Yeah.
Yeah. So in my group, it was Hungarian culture took a big part too. So we learned a lot of folk songs, for example, and played these. I'm also not sure how you say these folk games, I think,
Okay.
and learned a lot about history and Hungarian traditions. So it was a big part of it to have this knowledge as well. And yeah, just being proud of being Hungarian was a big part of it, actually.
Well, that's great. Well, that's what this podcast is all about, is, appreciating our Hungarian heritage. So, I remember the word. It's troop. like a scout
Oh, troop.
troop,
Yeah.
a troop. I wasn't a scout, so the word wasn't coming to my brain quickly enough, but it's a troop. So
I should have known because I actually spent 9 months in Connecticut on a scholarship to help Hungarian communities living in the US. And I was part of a scout troop here. I mean, not here because I'm in Texas right now, but in Connecticut.
Right.
And I participated in that too.
Yeah, I think a lot of Hungarian communities around the US, and I'm sure elsewhere too, outside of Hungary, I think the Scouts is a pretty big organization because it involves the
Yes.
kids, not just in the school as far as learning the language, but being involved in the culture, which is what you exactly mentioned, which is the, pride in the heritage. So let's move on and talk a little bit about language learning because you were always involved in language learning. It even says that on your website of like your love of languages. So it makes sense that you went to university to study languages. Now, tell us a little bit about that. Like, were you really into it before you got to college? Tell us a little bit how you got so interested in language learning and a little bit about your college language learning.
Yeah, I already loved learning languages in high school as well. I think in elementary school as well. Yeah, I loved English. I remember I used to write a diary all the time. And sometimes I wrote some words in English because I thought I was super cool for just writing one or two words in English. And when I read it back once a few years ago, I spelled everything incorrectly and it was super funny to read it. And I remember watching movies in English and I still have a lot of notes and I just love making notes from movies. I turned on the subtitles and I made notes of phrases that I thought were super cool in English and I collected these. It was just fun for me to do.
That's great.
I went to a bilingual high school and I studied English. Every subject was in English and I chose Russian as a second language. I didn't have any particular reason for that. I just loved the Russian letters.
They were different. Yeah.
It looked cool. It was everything about being cool, that time. Yeah. And then at university, I studied Polish and Russian. And in my free time too, I was always studying something. I took some Serbian lessons as well. I studied Serbian for a year at university. In high school, still in high school, I started to learn Japanese on my own because I was watching Japanese TV shows all the time. And I just learned the hiragana and katakana writing system just for fun. So it was always a big part of my life.
Yeah. Well, it seems like you have a love of languages. So it really does make sense that, this is what you do for a job now. It was like destiny. So when you were in university, like what was your original plan? Like, did you plan on becoming like a teacher of language or what was your original goal with all of your language learning?
That's so interesting to me how I became a teacher because I always knew since elementary school that I wanted to be a teacher. But my problem was that I never knew what I wanted to teach.
Okay.
And because I don't know how exactly it works in the US and I don't know what's the exact name for this or if it exists here. So when it's not actual studying,
right.
You just have conversations with the teacher. Exactly. And every class have one teacher who basically just cares about them and talks about important things with them. Mm-hmm. And this was my favorite class. We had these classes once or twice a week.
Okay.
Just talk about important things. And I think for me, it started with this idea that I wanted to connect with people. But for the longest time, I didn't know what subject would I be teaching. And I started to teach English first for beginners. But then I stopped doing that because I'm not a native speaker and I'm not an English teacher either.
Okay.
But that's how I started trying, experimenting if this was for me or not. And then my best friend took Hungarian as a second language teaching classes at university, and she told me about it. And until that point, I'd never even thought about that this is a thing, that this profession exists to teach foreigners Hungarian. And when she told me about these classes and how interesting it was, I started to think that, oh, this might be something for me because, learning so many languages, and I don't want to say that I speak so many languages, but I'm familiar with the structure.
Right.
And that helps you with how other people think. So then I thought that this knowledge that I have could help me a lot, understanding how they think and helping them more.
When we go to university, like sometimes like we have an idea of things that we like. For example, you studied languages because that's what you like, but you don't always know where that's going to lead you as far as how you're going to put that into a job. So it was great that you were able to put those two things together, helping people and, interacting with people, and then also teaching people how to speak Hungarian. And truthfully, as a Hungarian language learner myself, which I've on a little hiatus or break right now, you do look for people that are interested in really teaching, because then you get more out of it. So that's probably why you're so good at it, is because you really are mentally and emotionally invested in teaching Hungarian to people that want to learn, and people that want to learn, like myself and all of your people that follow you, and they want to learn too. So they're getting more out of it because they want to. It's not like school that you're required to attend, because I was an English teacher and I know I did a great job, but like I was excited about things that the students weren't always excited to learn. So, there's a little bit of a disconnect if they're not interested in reading what I was teaching, or what I was required to teach. So I feel like you have the best of all like the worlds. Like you get to do what you want. You get to teach, languages which you love. And the people that you teach really want to be there. So you kind of hit it out of the park there. So
Thank you.
yeah. And plus, you just never know where your life is going to lead. So it seems like it's going in the right path for you. I think we should start talking about how you actually came to the US. It was sort of by accident that you ended up here, but I'm going to let you tell that story and how that all happened for you.
Well, 6 years ago, I worked in New York, and that's where I met the love of my life. And this is how it happened. This is the story in a nutshell, that I met him there. And then we were in a long distance relationship for 4 years. And 2 years ago, we finally got married. So he's the reason why I moved here, because he's from here, from Texas. And yeah, and I moved here.
It's a pretty good reason. So, and now you are a Texan. So definitely nice warm weather pretty much all year long there, right?
Oh my God, could be a little bit less warmer. I would be grateful for that.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely one of the warmer states, but lots of good things in Texas. So, okay, there's an expression that necessity is the mother of invention. Over time, throughout history, when something is needed, somebody creates it or invents it. And I feel like your language learning podcast slash Patreon really follows that expression, because you looked around and you said, what everybody's doing is great, but they're not doing what you're doing. You created something pretty unique, which I'm really excited to talk about. So tell us how you had a little bit of an inspiration for this, because you were also trying to learn Spanish and you were finding some struggles, not with learning it, but just with how to learn it. So tell us how your language learning of Spanish gave you the inspiration to create your podcast slash Patreon.
Well, Spanish was the first language that I started to study independently.
Okay.
And I think this was a very eye-opening experience for me, because every other languages I learned in school or from a teacher at university, and that's a totally different thing. And at the beginning, I didn't know that it was a totally different thing, because I tried to do everything the same way as I was taught my whole life. And I was just sitting here being miserable, not understanding why on earth it just doesn't work. And then when it didn't work, I started to look for new ways. And I found language exchange partner.
Okay.
And learning like this with a friend, basically, it was so different. And I realized so many things. I have to add that my language exchange partner is a teacher as well. I just want to let people know that when you're a total beginner, like I was in Spanish, finding a language exchange partner might not work. But mine was a teacher, so he knew exactly how to talk to me at my level. That's a different story.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm a teacher too, so I knew how to talk to her in Hungarian too at her level. So it was a good exchange. And then I realized that, I don't have to learn every single thing. I don't have to memorize grammar tables. I can just choose what I need right now at the moment, because I think it all depends on what's your goal. I didn't have to take any tests or pass an exam or anything like that. I just wanted to be able to talk to my Mexican family as fast as possible. So I just started to speak. I started to talk to my friend every single week, and I looked up everything that I needed. And this was so interesting to see how it's different. Of course, I would say that both methods have their own advantages and disadvantages. I don't want to say that this is the best method ever, because I don't think that exists. I think the best method is what works the best for you. And
I agree.
That's something you have to find for yourself, but teachers can help you to find that way. So I realized that, first comes the language, and we learn grammar from language, not language from grammar. And this was the other way around at university. And that's why it was so hard to try to remember everything on my own, because I didn't have the teacher's instructions anymore. No one was telling me to write homework. I was just here on my own.
Yeah.
And if you're on your own and you're not even motivated because what you chose to study is not interesting for you and not relevant for your life at all, why would you learn it? You're an adult. You have a choice.
Absolutely. I guess learning something independently is definitely a lot different than attending some type of course or schooling, because even though you want to learn it as a language learner and you have the motivation of, wanting to speak with your family, doing it on an individual basis, as responsible as we are, sometimes other things get in the way, like with time, the things that you have to do, in your life, like, oh, I'll just do that later. Sometimes that could get in the way, especially if you're not having the motivation of having to do your homework because the teacher's going to check it, right?
Yeah.
Or take an exam. Tell us a little bit more how that turned into you creating your language learning podcast. When did it spark for you?
That's a good question. I started it, I think 3 years ago.
Okay.
I started to listen to a Spanish podcast at that time.
Okay.
And I started to use that for learning as well. And that was a time when just a lot of things hit me, like, why didn't I think of this yet? Why didn't we learn this in school? Why no one has ever taught me this? And that time, and still a little bit, maybe you can feel it, that I'm still a little bit mad when I think
that's
about...
a motivational emotion is what you're feeling.
Okay, that sounds better. Thank you. That's
You're
how I'm going
welcome.
to describe
You
it.
can use that phrase, motivational emotions.
Yeah, I have a lot of those.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
And so I just felt like this whenever I thought about how many years I spent in school. And I'm not saying that all of it was useless, but most of it. And it just made me angry how this time could have been used for so many good things, especially language learning. That's the most interesting, fascinating thing ever. And I spent, 6 years there. And the only thing that they never taught me was how to have a conversation with someone at the same age like me, for example.
Exactly.
That was the only thing that was missing.
Yeah. That's a big part, though. That's a really big part.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I just want to share that I took Spanish because that's a common language to take in schools, growing up, Spanish. And, I had it every day because I was in not in university, 1 year in university, but 4 years in regular schooling, and you have it every day. So you're immersed in it, but you're immersed not so much in conversation. So I can understand if people speak a little slower, because we do have the habit of speaking so quickly now in any language. And the conversation is really the key. So I think you hit the nail on the head, is learning conversation.
Yeah, exactly. And just so many there were so many things I realized when I started to listen to this Spanish podcast, and I started to study through these conversations with my language exchange partners. And, just stuff like, for example, that I realized I didn't have to learn vocabulary, like, I don't know, all the colors or all the names of the furniture. When am I going to use that? No one's going to ask me what's next to my table. So
true.
in real life.
Right.
And
but you'll learn that through the conversation. You'll learn those words naturally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what I really loved about the podcast, that, I don't have to learn everything from the podcast either. I can just listen and see that if they were talking about something that was really interesting, but there was a part that I didn't understand. And then I have this motivation that I really want to know what they said there. So I'm going to use the transcription. I'm going to look it up. I'm going to check this word. I'm going to analyze this sentence because I want to understand the grammar. But first, I had a context. It didn't start with, okay, I have to learn the past tense. For what? What do you want to say? Right. What do you want to use it for? And these are the things that I just didn't think about, because why would I? Right. It just wasn't my world at university. And it's something I really had to unlearn, actually.
Right. Well, I feel like schools in general around the world, they have to put together criteria to teach, but it doesn't take you to the next level of conversation. And a lot of times you don't get to the conversational level of any language that you're learning. And I can only use my own experiences and, of things that I know that happen in schools as being a teacher. You don't get that until like year 5 or 6 of taking a language every year in school, which you're going to every day, which is strange to me. Like, why wouldn't that be part of the first year that you're learning, even if they're tiny conversations? You seem to have drawn on all of your experiences in university, your language learning goals with Spanish, and listening to the podcast. So you've turned your language learning into a podcast. So let's talk about that, because you clearly have that emotional motivation, right? And you're like, oh, how come, I didn't do that, but you are doing that now. So let's talk about your podcast. Tell us what levels you have on your podcast. Tell us how you want to present your podcast. What do you want people to know about it?
Yeah, so I create episodes on mostly 3 levels: pre-intermediate, intermediate, and upper intermediate. I made a few episodes for beginners as well, but just to be honest, a podcast is usually longer, at least 5 minutes, but it has to be like 10 minutes at least, I think. And for beginners, I think that's too long to pay attention to. And it's also really hard for me to say anything interesting in this format. I think a dialogue would be easier for this. So that's why I chose these levels, because I think they fit the podcast format more. Right. So I'm trying to choose exciting topics, because I also feel like that's, for some reason, that's missing from language learning education all around the world. If you look at a textbook, I get the idea. I know that it has to be something general so everyone can relate to these topics. But after a while, it's just super boring to talk about your dream house and, I don't know, going to the market every single week.
Or the bus stop or the train station, right? Yeah.
So I try to choose things that, people can relate to, topics that I would talk to my friends, my Hungarian friends about. So I try to choose things that are relatable, because that's also part of my method, that when they hear something they can relate to, they feel like, oh my God, I feel the same way. I have to share my thoughts about this too. And then this will make them want to write a comment. So practice writing in Hungarian, or we can talk about it in our monthly meetings. And I always try to come up with something that make them want to talk. And I also make it very natural. I got this feedback 1,000 times that when people listen to my podcast, Hungarian learners listen to my podcast, they feel like as if a friend was talking to them. And this is my favorite feedback forever, because this is exactly my goal. I think just because something is a teaching or learning material, it doesn't have to sound unnatural. I don't know where we got this typical teacher voice that I had as well. And sometimes I still catch myself doing that when I record videos and I have to stop.
Right.
When, you know what I mean, when they over exaggerate words,
Yes.
how
Yes.
no one talks ever. And I just don't know. I don't know why we do that. A lot of language teachers do that.
I think it's
And
also because they're trying to pronounce the word, and also, especially if you're learning in person, like in a school, you have to project your voice out to the classroom.
yeah,
So we develop this, because I have it too. We develop this voice where
yeah,
we're like on stage and over
yeah.
pronouncing. So it makes sense.
Yeah, and in some situations it's fine. I mean, but as for this podcast, I also listened to a lot of podcasts in foreign languages when I was trying to find something for studying,
Hmm.
and they sounded so unnatural. And it's a podcast. You don't have to talk like you're standing by the whiteboard. You can just
Exactly.
start.
Exactly. It should feel natural, it should feel
Yeah.
natural. So you said that you have a lot of interesting topics that you tried to create, of things that, like, you would talk to your friends. Can you give us one or two topics that you talk about that are very natural topics that you cover?
Yeah. For example, I don't know, lately I chose a lot of topics about mental health because that seems to be a big topic all around the world right now.
Sure.
About psychology, how to learn with podcasts. So there's a lot of episodes about language learning itself, how I learned Polish. What else? I had an episode about bad experiences with native speakers trying to speak their language.
That's
And
funny. Yeah.
yeah, so very relatable things or stereotypes about Hungarians. And I'm talking about if I think it's true or not that
Oh,
much.
that's funny. I'm interested to hear all about that. I'm going to have to look that up and translate that.
Yeah, about what else? Social media, a few Hungarian traditions. So, of course, there's Hungarian related topics too. But, not like, I don't know, geography, history, and stuff like that, but everyday things that are interesting, fun facts and stuff like that.
Right.
Like my favorite places in Budapest or about my favorite Hungarian author. Sometimes I make interviews as well with other teachers. So people hear other people talking as well, not
Right.
just me. But I also think that it's good that they listen to only one person because, every people have their way of saying things. And if I keep repeating the same phrases, which I'm going to because that's how I speak, sometimes I use expressions or phrases. I don't know what are these like. In fact, honestly, the truth is that, stuff like this that makes it very natural if you use these in foreign
Right.
languages. And if you hear these 15 times, if you listen to, I don't know,
Right.
5 podcasts of
Hmm.
mine, then you will remember.
Right. I think those are important conversational phrases that
Yeah.
you don't usually get in traditional school settings. But those are things that you hear when you do go to the market, or, when you're standing at the bus stop. People are speaking naturally. They're not speaking like a textbook.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So that's great. That's excellent.
Yeah. And I don't know, I really love this format. It's it's called comprehensible input. That's what my
Hmm.
method is all about right
Okay.
now. Find something that you find relevant for your life, what's interesting for you, exciting for you at your level. So if you understand 60, 70% of it, that should be
Mhm.
good for your level because it shouldn't be too easy, shouldn't be too hard. If it's too boring or too overwhelming, that's not good either.
Right.
And what people really don't understand sometimes is that learning grammar is not only learning grammar itself, like with grammar tables, charts, and memorizing endings. Having a transcription for a podcast, for an audio, that's grammar too. You
Yeah.
have so many sentences in context that you can analyze and you can try to find a pattern. And if you do this on your own with things that actually interest you, that's such a different level of motivation.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that it's a really good thing that's worth a try.
I agree. I have to say that, I feel like we spoke about this, or I might have spoken about it with somebody else, but I believe for myself, I am a former English teacher, so I know grammar from growing up, learning it on grammar tables and such. But, I have had lessons in Hungarian, and I have gained so much from trying to read the Hungarian well, the comments too, but like what people write underneath their social media post. I'll try to read as much as I can and interpret as much as I can before I hit the translate button, and I'm like, oh, I got, 50% this time, or approximately 70. And that's where I started picking up on like verb endings for Hungarian, because my brain, when I was learning Hungarian, and I will still learn, but when my previous lessons were great, but the verb endings for Hungarian was just really like too much information, because it's typical, like learning on a table that I guess for my brain doesn't work. Seeing it in a transcription, like on a social media post. So that's amazing that you have that word for word transcripts for your podcast so that people can listen and then either follow along as they listen, or listen to it again and follow along, or read it first. Like there's so many options. That's pretty great. I'm looking forward to getting to the level that I can do that. So I think I'm just going to jump in and, start at your beginning, and hopefully I could at least get to at least 30% of what I'm listening to and what I read. So I think that's a huge bonus for your podcast, that you have that word for word transcription.
I hope you're going to like it.
Oh, I know. I've already peeked at a few of them, and I really like it. And I've been a big fan of yours for a while on social media, and I love, what you post. So like, how you can tell when you watch somebody on social media over time, how like things would work for you. And like, I know I'm definitely going to dive in a little bit more responsibly to, take back a little bit of my own Hungarian language learning. So stay tuned for that, everybody.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah, maybe I'll document it too, because I feel like maybe if I put myself out there, it'll motivate me as well. So now you also have a Patreon subscription situation. So let's talk about that, because that's something that you could use along with your podcast as well. So it's additional learning. So tell us about your Patreon.
Yeah, so the podcast is something that's available for everyone, basically on every podcast platforms, the most popular ones you can find. And
Right.
Patreon is a membership program, and Patreon is for online creators if they want to publish something extra for their audience. So I created these 3 packages that you can choose from if you want to have extra material for studying Hungarian. It could be good if you have private lessons, but you also want to do something on your own. So it doesn't have to be either this or that. You can combine the 2, or you can also just do it on your own. So yeah, I have these 3 packages, and they have these very cool Hungarian names.
Yeah, I love it. Tell us all about that.
Yeah, there's kolbász, and that means sausage.
Yeah.
Vizsla. I'm pretty sure everyone knows what's a vizsla. And the turul is the 3rd one.
So turul, you might have to explain a little bit, because I think everybody knows sausages and the vizsla, dog. So tell everyone what turul means.
Turul is a mythical Hungarian creature. It's a bird. It looks like oh my God, what's that bird? Falcon, I think, in English.
Okay. Yeah.
But a bigger one. It's very huge.
It's very common, right? In like mythical stories in Hungary.
Yes.
Correct? Yeah.
Yes, and you can find a statue of it in a lot of places in Hungary.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. So you have 3 levels, and the first level is the kolbász. So tell everybody what they get if they subscribe to your kolbász level.
They get instant access to, I think right now, 10 or 11 vlog videos. I upload 1 new each month, and they're with Hungarian and English subtitles. And I usually talk about something that's interesting to me in that moment, usually something about language learning. And they also get access to our close friends list on Instagram, where I post stories for Patreon members only, also with Hungarian and English subtitles, because, it takes a lot of time to post subtitles on both languages. So when it's just a regular story, I speak in Hungarian and I put English subtitles on Instagram in stories. On YouTube, I post both languages as well. But as for Instagram stories, just typing those both languages is crazy sometimes. So, but everything for Patreon members, so they get both. They also get access to 10 short texts in 3 levels with audio and a vocabulary list. And they also get 1 new text each month. So
wow. That's a lot. That they're getting a lot there.
And one more thing.
Oh, one more. Okay.
A downloadable PDF study guide. So I don't want to just throw everything out there that here's the material, do whatever you want to do with it.
Right.
I actually put a guide together to give tips, inspiration, suggestions how to use the material efficiently on your own. So of course it's something you have to find what works for you, because I don't know, I don't want to tell you to study 10 minutes every day in the morning. I don't know if you're a morning person. If you're not, then don't force it.
Right, exactly. I think, what I really like about your Patreon program and levels is that, like what you just said, you're just not throwing the material out there. You're also giving like the guidance. So it's like you're giving the lesson, but also like the teacher's lesson plan and like together. And I think that's really helpful to a language learner, because doing like your lessons independently without guidance sometimes it could be boring. It might not be helpful. I think you really connect all that together, which is super valuable. Now, obviously, like when you sign up for the next level, which is Vishla, you're getting everything from the Kolbas level, but you get a little bit more. Tell what the extra things that you would be getting in the Vishla level.
Of course. Yes, as you mentioned, you get everything what includes the Kolbas membership. Plus, you get all the transcriptions of the podcast transcripts. It looks like a blog. So you just have to scroll down and everything is numbered and there's tags. So you can find everything very easily. If you look up a title in my podcast, if you see that, oh, this is an interesting episode. I'm interested in this topic. I would like to listen to this. And then you can go to Patreon and look up the exact same number for the episode and just download the transcription and follow along. Maybe try to repeat it, for practicing pronunciation, try to analyze sentences. So you can use all these transcriptions. So you get all of them, that you get access to all of them. So they're always there whenever you want to find one.
Yeah.
Plus you get the new ones, obviously, as long as you're subscribed. And not so long ago, I started to make one podcast a week. So
wow. Do you sleep ever? Because you're doing a lot of great things. So, and then there's one last level, the Turul level, which I'm sure I'm not pronouncing properly, and it could improve. So and you're getting even more in the Turul level. Tell us all the amazing things, and if you sign up for that level of your Patreon.
Oh, and actually, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention one more thing for the Vizsla. So besides the podcast transcriptions, there's also a monthly meeting, which is my favorite thing ever.
Oh.
And we meet once a month, but there's 2 groups. So there's an easier one for more like pre-intermediate level, and the other one is for intermediate level. And we meet on a Sunday each month. It's usually the 3rd Sunday of the month. This can change, but I always send out everything 1 week before the meeting so everyone can plan their week. I send some questions and we talk about the topic of the month, which is, as I mentioned, is the short text of the month. So that's about one certain topic. And then we talk about that topic based on questions that I send out in advance. So if you're nervous, there's something, you know what we're going to talk about. You can also prepare your answers. If you're super nervous, you can just read them out loud on the first meeting.
Right. I like that you have all of these language learning options, because everyone learns differently. Yeah. And everyone also has like a comfort level or not such a good comfort level. So the fact that they can practice a little bit or even write it down and read it out loud, that makes people feel probably very comfortable to join these group meetings. That sounds so exciting. So you also have a 3rd level, the Turul level. I can't even imagine what happens there. Tell us about that.
Well, everything what Kolbas and Vizsla gets, Turul gets it too. And they also have an option to write a half-page long text each month, which is also about the topic of the month. So
Right.
if you have the total package, then you get to practice speaking, writing, listening, and reading. So all 4 skills.
Wow.
And I always build everything around the same topic. So you have a chance to practice vocabulary a little bit more organized.
Right.
If you want to choose a few words for a certain topic that you want to practice, and you can practice it in writing too, or in speaking in the monthly group meetings.
That's really great. And I honestly say that, like, when you sign on to your website, people are going to see that they're getting a lot for their money. You're providing such great materials. So obviously we'll leave all of that information in the show notes later so people can log on and check it out. The method you've created is so well developed and well thought out, because you used a lot of your personal experiences as far as wanting to learn languages, and it's so organized, and it really hits a lot of different language learning experiences that people want. And like I said in the beginning, if you're choosing as an adult to learn a new language, you generally want to do it. So I feel like your program is really providing all the things that people would want to do, and as they can dedicate as much time as they want, whether it's using the first level or the third level that you create in addition to the podcast. So it sounds like you're putting a lot of work behind all of this, and it's growing and it's growing. So do you have any plans for additional levels than the ones that you have now? Tell us about what's happening in the future for you.
Yeah, it's funny that you asked that, because it's actually the other way around. I had more levels. I had 5 at the beginning.
Okay.
But it was too overwhelming and impossible to keep up with it.
Okay.
And this is just creating for Patreon is a full-time job right now.
Sure.
So I had different levels, but now I think everything is much more organized and much more clear what you get. And I reorganized everything in January this year. And now I think it's still enough. You're going to still have a lot of things to work on. It's not so overwhelming right now. I would say that it's really balanced right now. And I like it like this.
Yeah, I think it is very balanced what you have. And like I said, you're getting a lot. I know the behind the scenes, what goes into producing obviously a podcast, because this is a podcast, but also as a teacher, creating lessons. I did that for over 20 years. And you want to create fun things that aren't always from fun ideas. When you're teaching, kids don't always want to hear what you have to say. So you have to make it sound a little bit better and interesting. And not that language learning isn't interesting, because it is, but sometimes it's difficult to be motivated. And everything that you produce is extremely motivational and it has personality. So that's pretty exciting. So if people are interested, like you said, your podcast is available pretty much wherever you download podcasts, right? So they can easily find you on all those platforms. Hungarian with Sziszi. And so tell us how they can follow you on all the other social medias and your website, because I know that there are definitely people out there that are interested in signing up, because what you have to offer is pretty great. So tell us how we can contact you.
Well, I think I'm the most active on Instagram.
You are. I can attest to that. You are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I am.
Yeah.
I feel really comfortable on that platform. So, but I'm Hungarian with Sziszi everywhere. You can find me like this everywhere under this name, on Facebook as well. Where else? On YouTube. Yeah. You can find me on Patreon as well. Patreon.com/Hungarian with Sziszi. On Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music.
Right. So basically your website, HungarianWithCC.com, takes you to all of those things as well.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that you took the time to be a guest on my podcast. And I really believe that so many people are going to be excited to check you out. Start off on the social media, see what Sziszi's all about. And I think you're going to like what you see. Thank you for being here today, Sziszi. It was my pleasure.
Thank you so much for inviting me and for everything that you're doing, because you're doing an amazing job as well. And thank you so much for the kind words.
Oh, thank you. That's so kind of you to say. I really appreciate that. You as well. Thanks so much. Thanks for joining me today on this episode of the Hungarian Heritage Podcast. Don't forget to check the show notes to find out how you can connect with Sylvia Pop from Hungarian with Sziszi on all of her social media platforms. You will also find information about where you can find Sziszi's videos, her podcast episodes, and of course, her learning membership programs. Maybe this will be the motivation you were looking for to improve your Hungarian learning. I know it was for me. If you have feedback or questions about today's episode, or you would like to connect with me at the podcast, you will also find my email, social media information, and podcast website in the show notes. If you've enjoyed this episode and you're interested in learning more about this Hungarian heritage community that we are building, please don't hesitate to reach out. I would love to hear from you. A big thanks to my audio editor, Tori Irvin, for working her audio magic on this episode and every episode of this podcast. Our theme music is Hungarian Dance by Pony Music, used with special license from Envato Market. Thanks again for listening, and don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to your podcast so we can continue to connect our modern lives with our Hungarian heritage and grow this Hungarian heritage community. Until next time, goodbye everyone. Sziasztok mindenkinek!